Abuse, fondly known by us as TICTA. I'm Neil Sandler, President of WJCS Board. It's an honor to be here, and we're delighted that all of you can join us today as we reflect on this organization that has been at the forefront of sexual abuse and trauma treatment in Westchester since 1982. I'd also like to acknowledge a group that has been vital support to WJCS and this program in particular. Assemblyman David Buchwald, Elisa Jacobs from Assemblyman Avenatti's office, Deputy County Executive Kevin Plunkett, Michael Orth, who is the Acting Commissioner of DCMH, and Joe Kenner, who is Deputy Commissioner of DSS. Thank you all for being here. So today you'll hear from the three leaders who directed TICTA for over the last 35 years and developed it from a small pioneering program with 4 social workers and a director to Westchester County's premier outpatient trauma treatment center. Following their presentations, we'll meet a client who's been treated by TICTA and hear how TICTA has helped her recover, gain strength, and work to help and educate others through these types of presentations. Following that, Westchester County's Acting Commissioner of Community Mental Health, Michael Orth, will moderate a Q&A session with the 3 directors. They'll probably have some questions for the panel, but please feel free to ask your own as well. And not to tip his hand, but you'll be hearing from Bernie Kimberg with a special announcement at the end of the program, so please stay with us until then. And of course, we'll have time for coffee and refreshments at the end of the program. So before we get started, I'd like to welcome a special guest who's brought greetings from the county, Deputy County Executive Kevin Plunkett.
Good morning to everyone. It is truly a great honor for me to be here today representing our county executive, but really representing everybody in Westchester County, because the work that WJCS does, not only with its treatment center for trauma and abuse, but for all of the other programs, which we are so proud at the county executive's office and with the county departments to partner with WJCS. That work is just so vital in Westchester County. And over the years that I've had the privilege to work for our county executive, Rob Astorino, and work on many different initiatives, I've come to understand the good work of WJCS. Through Alan, through the staff, I want to congratulate the board, not only the current board, but the boards that have been part of this organization for years, because it takes leadership, whether it be at the board level, it takes leadership at the executive director level, and certainly it takes the cooperation and the hard work of everybody who's with the organization. So on behalf of Rob Astorino, myself, on behalf of our departments, you heard Michael Orth this year, our Acting Commissioner of Mental Health, Joe Kenner from our Department of Social Services. We are proud to be a partner with WJCS on so many programs and to help fund the programs that really are deserving. But today we are celebrating one specific program, and that program you call TICTA, Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse. And there's something very unique about it, because 35 years ago, the word trauma really wasn't part of the lexicon of the care that was necessary for people in violent family situations or in different challenging situations. And somebody with the foresight of Alan Trager, followed up by Pat and Liane in their jobs, was able to understand all of the challenges that come from individuals who are living in conditions that create the potential for emotional trauma, physical trauma, family trauma, relationship trauma, all of the things that today we hear about regularly. And it's because of the foresight of WJCS and its teammates that we are here today celebrating the 35 years of such great work. I don't know all of you, but I know that your presence here means that you're committed to what you're doing. On behalf of the county executive, on behalf of our team, our departments, we are committed to continuing the good work that you're doing. So on behalf of our county executive, on behalf of my fellow colleagues in government, and on behalf of all of us in Westchester County, I have the distinct privilege to recognize 35 years of TICTA by presenting to the three executive directors a proclamation recognizing what they have done throughout their 35 years of hard work. So I would ask maybe all three of you to come up. We can take a picture, but I will read only the last provision of this proclamation. Now therefore, I, Robert P. Astorino, County Executive of Westchester County, do hereby proclaim October 26, 2017 to be WJCS Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse Recognition Day in Westchester County, and join my friends and neighbors to mark this impressive accomplishment and to commend its dedication and commitment to Westchester County. So Alan, Pat, Liane, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin, for really inspiring words. Jim. We really appreciate your support over the years, and obviously for being here, and especially the support that you've given TICTA. So we really can't. In fact, we believe it's a grant from the county. I mean, you can think of the county as the early round investor in this concept of TICTA that led to the creation of the center, and that funding was clearly pivotal in helping WJCS launch the first and only trauma treatment center in Westchester at that time. Since then, the list of funders has grown very significantly, and as you can see in the program, and WJCS appreciates all of your and their generous support and commitment. And now it's my honor to introduce three people that really don't need an introduction. We'd like you to welcome the three directors who have led this award-winning center. Alan Trager, WJCS CEO and the founder of TICTA, who directed it for 5 years. Pat Lemp, Assistant Executive Director for Clinic-Based Services, who headed TICTA for 20 years. And Liane Nelson, Chief Psychologist and current TICTA Director for the past 10 years. So Alan, I'm now going to give you the podium, but before we do, I was just told that Andrea Stewart Cousins is also here with us, so I want to see what that is.
Okay, yeah, this thing's, I have to really kiss this to hear it. Can you guys hear me without it? Yeah. So, Susan, I'm going to go up there. So I've already broken the rule. They didn't want me to do this, but
The hell with them, I'm the CEO. Plus, they restricted me to 8 minutes. It takes me 8 minutes to say good morning to everybody. So, okay, so I'll pack as much as I can into my time. DCMH, Department of Community Mental Health, got some money from the state or the federal government. I think it was federal money. They did an RFP, WJCS submitted a proposal, and we got it. So my boss at the time said to me, you want to do something different, you're going to start this program. I didn't know a damn thing about sex abuse and incest, but it sounded like a worthy cause. I said, let's go for it. And we had enough money to not only hire another full-time person, a woman, because we thought we needed a man and a woman, we'll get back to that in a second, but we also had enough money to get proper training, and that mattered a lot. So there were a limited number of experts in the country and in the world that knew much about child sexual abuse. Two of them, Nick Groth and Sue Segroy, ran an institute at St. Joseph's College in West Hartford, Connecticut. And so Ann and I were able to go for 2 weeks and stay there overnight for 3 or 4 nights at a time to really meet with them and learn all that we possibly could about what child sexual abuse is, the syndrome, causes, nature of offenders, et cetera, et cetera. So that was wonderful. But the other thing we needed to do was not only find out what are the dynamics of child sexual abuse and what do you do about treatment, but we're starting a program. What should a program look like? How should you staff it? What are the things you need to think about when you're starting a program? It wasn't that hard to find out what the state-of-the-art for the programs were, because there were only a few. Hennepin County in Minnesota, Santa Clara, California. There were a few counties that were really ahead of the curve. But that's how our program started. And by the way, it was an incest program, so our acronym, not a good one, was Victims of Incest Program, VIP program. I subsequently changed it to Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center, but that was the birth of what today is TICTA. The other thing we felt that we had to do at the time was education, because as Kevin said, people were not talking about this stuff very much. And so we spent a lot of time not only trying to develop our program, but also trying to get out there and talk about the reality of child sexual abuse. What I tended to do was lowball the statistics, because I figured if I took the most aggressive statistics, people would look at me and say, he's running this program, so naturally he thinks that this is the only program in the world. So, you know, if the statistics were anywhere between 1 in 3 or 1 in 5, I'd say 1 in 5. Because the numbers were outrageous. 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused, have unwanted sexual abuse in their life. The number is staggering. We all know it's true today. In 1982, they were not so credible. So we would do grand round is a restaurant, but forget that. We would do grand rounds at hospitals and superintendent conference days. The New York Times heard about our program. There weren't very many programs around in the country, so they interviewed me and attended an adult victims group for adults, women and men, a group we had started for people that had been sexually abused when they were kids, and they attended the group. At the same time, a couple of months later, the first primetime movie ever about incest aired on TV. It was called Something About Amelia, and the star was Ted Danson, the guy from Cheers. So the TV show's about to occur that evening, and all of a sudden I start getting calls. Alan, will you appear live at 5 on CBS? Will you appear on ABC, NBC? Why? Because the New York Times had their article about our program that day, and so they actually thought we knew what we were talking about. So there was an explosion. We were on all the TV shows and everything else. It was a wonderful opportunity for WJCS's program to get publicity, but more importantly, it was about, let's talk about this stuff. And by the way, I would say good ways and bad ways. I got calls from the producers of Oprah and Phil Donahue to come and appear on the show. I have to make decisions about things like that. We chose not to because they wanted families and it felt exploitive. So on the one hand, that's how many I got left. That's if I'm almost done. But, if you give me another one of those signs, so are you. Okay, so this was also a period of time. It was also a period of time when there were a lot of daycare scandals. All over the country, you would hear allegations of sexual abuse, and it occurred in this environment. And so we started to hear conversations about, when do you believe kids, when do you not believe kids, are there exaggerations, it's a divorce, and one's making up against the other. So that was the climate in the 1980s. The other piece of child sexual abuse has to do with the fact that it's not only clinical, but it's a legal issue. And so one of the things we learned very quickly was how the folks that work in our program need to understand that there's a very thin line between engaging a kid and leading the witness. And so that kind of stuff was what was happening in the 80s as this program was developing. Adrian Scancarelli was the local judge, and I remember we got set up by we worked with an incest family. So I should say that the first person I hired was Ann Ganella. She was a full-time worker, and me. And we were working with families, so we would work with the victim, siblings, the offending parent, as well as the non-offending parent. So the offending guy, who was doing everything right in treatment, but hijacked us and had their lawyer go to court. And Scancarelli, man, almost put us out of business. She said, Trager doesn't know what he's doing. That program, I don't know what the hell they're doing over there, was bad. It was a setup by their lawyer. 4 months later, we were back in court, and she commended what a great program we had, what great work we were doing, and of course, who took credit for the evolution of our program? The lawyer who set us up. Okay, so that's the environment we were living in. One of the things we felt a responsibility to do was to also educate the professional community. So big brothers and big sisters would ask us to do consultations to make sure they weren't recruiting child molesters. Residential treatment centers would do the same. Ann Boyer, who, I'm looking at Joe, used to be the supervisor of Child Protective Services at DSS, very progressive, came up with accessed money for a grant and hired WJCS for 2 years to train the supervisors in Child Protective Services and many of their staff. One of the best programs we ever did. It was really, I thought it was really helpful in terms of educating them, but it also was good in terms of connecting WJCS and the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center, the artist formerly known as the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center, to Child Protective Services. The other thing we had to make decisions about was what not to do. So we decided we wouldn't do validations, and we can get into a conversation about that later, but it had to do with to what extent the world would rely on the experts of child sexual abuse to tell everybody whether abuse had occurred or not occurred. So we chose not to do that. We also chose not to serve as expert witnesses for offenders. Again, we can talk about that later. We kept expanding, we added more staff. At one point by the time Pat took over, we'll get into that later, we had already expanded. One of the things we built into the program was, as important as it is to do supervision of individual staff, it was equally important to meet as a team, starting back in 1982. Because what happens is if you're the guy that works with the offender and you're the person that works with the victim, if you're not talking to each other, you wind up getting annoyed at each other. And so how you develop a program and help it evolve in a constructive, productive way was heart and soul of what we needed to do. I want to make one general comment, read something, and then I'm done. So it'll be pretty close to 8 minutes. We've actually come a long way. When you think about the fact that we now take for granted that Mariska Hargitay and SVU is a perfectly reasonable program to have and to talk about the issues of child sexual abuse, we've come a long way, Kevin. We have a long way to go, but there are things in 2017 that we take for granted that were not part of the landscape in 1982. So I want to tell you 3 really quick stories. The first one, a person I worked with for a long period of time who ultimately became a chiropractor, had been sexually abused by her father for a number of years. She taught me about disassociation because she could describe every tile in the ceiling in the basement where she was abused. That was her way of not experiencing that awful experience. Another person was relocated from another country after being raised by a single parent who was her abuser, went through many, many years of struggling with betrayal and who she could trust and having friends. And in 2017, she's married to a terrific guy and having a wonderful life. You learn a tremendous amount from the people you work with, as a lot of my colleagues know, about courage and about resiliency from the people we work with, and that people can be okay. I want to read one last thing. A 12-year-old kid I was working with had been sexually abused by his uncle. And in the course of working with him, we decided that he would write a letter to his uncle. This is what he wrote. Dear Uncle Charlie, I hate your guts because of what you did to me, and I wonder if that happened to you. And why did you take it out on me? If it didn't happen to you, maybe it was the drugs that kicked in. Why the hell did you do it for? And how come you didn't do it to my brothers? I'm glad you didn't, though. Please write back. It tells you about the issues that people deal with. This is a way to deal with them. This guy's going to be, this kid was fine. I mean, he did very, very well, and I'm sure he's doing fine today. Some of the things that happened in 1982 and 2017 look different. The 2 women that I described and this kid, 1982, 2017, same issues. In 1987, we had an interim director. Then I hired a terrific hire to take over as the next executive, you gave it the title executive director before, the next director of the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center in 1988, Pat Lemp.
So in thinking about today and our comments, and Liane and Alan and I had some conversations, really came to think about this as stages of development. So Alan started the program kind of in its infancy and early childhood. I kind of think I had the adolescent stage of the program, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And Liane, really having a mature program, has taken it to new heights. So hopefully we'll capture all of those things in our comments today. The other thing I want to highlight is a couple of things that Alan touched on. One is this work really takes a team. So we have the privilege of standing up here or sitting up here and representing many of the people in this room, but this is really, the 35 years has been a lot of hard work by incredible clinicians who do this work on a daily basis and do a great job in it. So this, we're the voice, but this is really about all of you, many people sitting right at this table, and the people who have previously worked in the program, the people who continue to do it. And the other point I want to make is a little bit of what Alan just talked about in highlighting the 3 people that he worked with. And that is, our greatest learning is really from the people who have experienced abuse and come to us at a point where everything in their life has said to them, don't trust, and yet they trust us and they work with us. So that's pretty incredible, and that's where much of our learning takes place. And I'm going to try in 8 minutes to highlight 3 what I consider important learning points in the evolution in our adolescent phase here, and tell you a little bit about how we got to those points and the takeaways from them. So let me, and it's 3 that popped out in my mind. There are many, many others, and I'm sure the people who have been doing this work could think of many others. But I want to start by telling you about a woman who called our program many years ago. She was 24 years old at the time she called the program. And she called and asked some questions about coming in. She was looking to come to therapy, she thought. And so in the initial call, she was very meek, very timid, and she had never been in therapy before. And again, remember, the name of the program at this point was the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center. So she called and said, so, like, who would I be meeting with? And is it private? And is it confidential? And what do the offices look like? Tell me more about it. So we did. She made an appointment and she no-showed. But she called back again and had more questions, this time about the training of the clinicians. You know, how do they know what they know? What kind of training have they had? We answered her questions. She made another appointment, didn't come in. This happened another time, and finally, after the 4th attempt, she came in. She was actually seen by Valerie. You're gonna know who this is shortly. Valerie Holman, who was a clinician in our program. And Valerie and I have discussed it quite a bit. We didn't know what to expect. So in comes this very attractive, petite, well put together woman. She worked either in bookkeeping or accounting. She told us her life was kind of a mess, that she was estranged from her family. She had a partner, but it wasn't a good relationship. And for about 3 months, she was a model client. She showed up regularly, she worked hard, she was talking about lots of things that had happened to her. And then Valerie had a voicemail message on her phone from a child, and it sounded like a 5 or 6-year-old child crying. And this child said, so I'm gonna call the client Linda, and the child said, Linda's in big trouble. I'm really worried about Linda. She's telling secrets. She's not supposed to be telling secrets. And so we scratched our head and we said, you know, does Linda have a child that she didn't tell us about? Does she have a younger sibling? She came in the next time, Valerie spoke to her about it, and she kind of got sheepish. She put her head down, she got really nervous. She said she wasn't sure what was going on, picked her head up, and she was this confident, articulate adult. And talked about, she actually called herself overseer, and talked about much of what was happened and essentially how this woman, Linda, coped with ongoing abuse by most of the people in her life who were supposed to take care of her. So we were seeing what was the first time we were seeing somebody with what was called then multiple personality disorder, and we've gone on to understand much more now as dissociative identity disorder. The work itself was fascinating. This woman taught us a tremendous amount about the human spirit and the ability to go on and cope when it looks like one shouldn't be able to do it, and the ability to kind of pull on internal resources. So lesson number 1 for us is really appreciating that the human spirit has incredible and creative coping skills, and going on to understand that. Lesson number 2, again, came from our clients, and that is we were working with kids, and this is going to sound like common sense to most of us now, but we were working with kids, and we started hearing about kids being sexually abused by other kids, older siblings, cousins, kids in more powerful positions. And we had not really heard about that before. So fortunately for us, being in Westchester County with terrific resources and support, we partnered with the Westchester County Department of Probation and began the Juvenile Sexual Offender Program, which has gone on to be the Juvenile Starting Over program that Rhonda Donat has been with for more than 20 years in working with these kids. And in the program, we provide assessment and treatment to kids who sexually abuse other kids. Fortunately for us, again, being in Westchester County, the county had a SAMHSA grant at this time, remember, Michael? And so we had the ability to travel around the country to really teach other people what we were learning about kids who sexually abuse other kids, and to learn from them. And we worked with DCMH and Family Ties in really bringing this information out there. So lesson number 2 was, not all offenders are adult males. Beginning to counter that stereotype that was held onto for so long. So continuing our adolescent development, you know how adolescents can sometimes be a little cocky, or they know it all and the emotions are in different places. I'm not sure that we were in such a different place. So we were in a place where the program was great, we were seeing lots of people heal, we were getting lots of referrals, our staff had grown. And then the National Institute of Justice came out with a report that talked about trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy being the most effective and efficacious one of the most effective and efficacious means of treatment for kids who have been abused. We didn't know anything about this model, so here's where the cockiness comes in. I remember reading it and talking to the staff about it and taking this position of, you know what, we better learn about this because we're not doing it and we know what we're doing, so we need to be able to say why we're not doing this. So we put together a study group led by our former chief psychologist, Dr. Leslie Bogan, and we met weekly at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning for a period of about a year, and we studied the model, and we practiced the model, and we did role plays, and we did homework, and then we started applying it to our clients, and learned pretty quickly that this is really an effective and efficacious model. And for us, really the beginning of learning about evidence-based treatments, because again, at that time people didn't even use the term evidence-based treatment. So lesson number 3, but actually let me step back for a minute. So in doing this, and I have to say this, Connie, I hope I don't embarrass you. Connie and I were just chatting before, Consuelo Guerrero, before the program, and she just told me about a child who she terminated with yesterday. After 2 years of treatment, she had a celebration, she had a cake, and I said, Connie, what did you do TFCBT? And she's like, I do TFCBT all the time. So this became really the core of our program, and it felt like the discovery of penicillin. Like we could do this, but we could help people get better and get better faster. So the Child Sexual Abuse Treatment Center kind of outgrew its name as it moved out of this kind of adolescent phase, and we recognized that the skills that it took to work with kids who had been sexually abused really applied to other victims of domestic violence. Silvana brought us that expertise, thankfully. We went on to work with children who had been victims of domestic violence, who lived with domestic violence, and we became the Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse. So, as we moved out of this adolescent phase, fortunately, Dr. Liane Nelson took over and actually moved us into adulthood. So I'll let Liane talk about that.
Adult. I don't know. The first thing actually that I'd like to do is I would like to introduce the members of the Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse. So please stand up when I say your name, would you? Stacy Meany. Sally Solari, Supervisor of the Police Department. Melissa Morales, also in Peekskill. Jenny Kaplan, also in Peekskill. Karen Shumway Payne, who left us 3 weeks ago. but was a central part of the program in Peekskill for 7 years. Silvana Trabout, Assistant Director. Carol Chu Peralta, also in Hartsdale. Rhonda Donat, Hartsdale. Ayana Grant Green, Miriam Baramel, June McHenley, who makes everything down here. Michaela Guerrero, youngest. Caitlin Simpson, Mount Vernon. Maria Christina Latorre, Teresa Toriago, youngest. Patricia Alvarez, Peekskill. Lee Hasler, Hartsdale. Sarah Chronic, also in Hartsdale. Anybody I missed? No. We also have 3 psychology fellows, Shira Ritholtz, Lena Pearl, and Carly Collins. So you can see we have really grown and expanded. The other thing that this adult would like to do is recognize our community partners, because I think that our community partnerships have greatly expanded, and I'm very, very proud of those. So the Child Advocacy Center, hello, Danielle Weisberg. We represent mental health, and the Child Advocacy Center is where children who have been suspected of being sexually abused or seriously physically abused have their forensic interviews and examinations and receive referrals for treatment. We also sit on the multidisciplinary team in Westchester County, where we represent mental health, and we just meet monthly and discuss cases of child sex abuse and severe physical abuse. The White Plains Police Department, I don't know if Chief Fitzsimmons is here, but we have had many collaborations, and we'll be doing a training collaboration in 2018. Department of Social Services, Dr. Chu Peralta has provided consultation and supervision for the Safe Harbor Project and also the Cross Systems Unit. Thank you, Carol. We work closely with probation because of our juvenile starting over program. DCMH has provided funding for a number of years for our Spanish initiative, which has allowed us to increase our number of Spanish-speaking clinicians from 1 to 5. Thank you, Michael Worth and associated people. Healthcare, we have provided trauma trainings for their medical staff. Schools, I have done consultations with the Chappaqua School District, with the Hastings School District, and with the Harvey School, and in particular about helping schools become trauma informed, and also to address what I believe is an epidemic of teacher sexual misconduct. The District Attorney's Office, Stacy Nolan-Meany is our trauma therapist at the DA's office. And she helps victims receive treatment and also helps them to prepare for testifying. And that seems to be about it for this adult, acknowledging the other adults in the room who have helped us. One of the other changes that was made, there was a very prescient psychology intern who noted that she could tell what the dominant diagnosis was that we treated, which was post-traumatic stress disorder, because she said we acted like we all had PTSD in our staff meetings. So we were very jumpy and reactive, and we interrupted each other. So then I went to our dialectical behavior therapy clinician at the time and said, how would you treat us? And she said, I would treat you with mindfulness. So probably for about the last 8 years, I'm guessing, we have started our weekly team meetings with mindfulness practices, which have really helped us to be more responsive and respectful and calmer. That has been important. Also a focus on vicarious trauma. I think that's something that everybody who does this difficult work needs to pay attention to, both individually and as a group and as an institution. We now have another adult evidence-based practice called STARE NST. We have increased our ability to treat people with dissociation, as mentioned both by Alan and Pat. We currently treat, I believe, about 7 or 8 people with dissociative identity disorder. Our awareness of the prevalence of dissociation and its impact on the intergenerational transmission of trauma. So basically, if you have somebody with a serious trauma history who dissociates and is not addressed in treatment, then often that can be transmitted to their children. So we really wanted to do something about preventing the intergenerational transmission of trauma. And Miriam and Ayana have been essential in providing groups for parents of young children and children to really prevent this cycle. That's been hugely important for us, and we currently have a program in Yonkers. We also address the barriers to treatment, so we provide them with food, Metro cards, and childcare for the children who are not receiving group treatment. Finally, I'd like to mention an agency-wide project that the Treatment Center has been honored to spearhead, which is helping us become trauma-informed. And when the Adverse Childhood Experience study was conducted initially in 1998, it pointed out the fact that trauma and adverse childhood experiences are a huge public health threat in the United States, probably the #1 public health threat, because it's associated with poor outcomes both in mental health and physical health. And also in demonstrating the prevalence of this problem, it really shifted the conversation away from what's the matter with you to what happened to you. And we have brought this home at WJCS and have been engaged. We're now in the 3rd year of a 5-year plan to become trauma-informed. And basically what that means is helping our clients and our clinicians and our staff to feel emotionally safe and physically safe and make sure that the environment is as controllable and as predictable as possible, recognizing that there are the trauma survivors we know, the trauma survivors we don't know, and then everyone else who interacts with our trauma survivors. So it makes sense for us to treat everyone with an optimum level of respect and help people feel that they are in control. And this has been helped tremendously by the Blumenthal family, who gave a generous donation to allow us to do this. In conclusion, I would like to say thank you to all our community partners, our clients, our staff, especially to Alan and Pat, without whom this would not be possible. And I'd like to do a special little personal thank you to my husband, Todd, for supporting me in this very difficult work. Getting to the heart and the soul of our program, I am extremely honored to introduce Tanika Bailey, a woman who exemplifies strength and beauty and bravery. And I am honored to have Tanika come and speak to us. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. So I don't have to look at everybody that wrote my speech out. Hello everyone, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate the invitation to come here and speak to you about an organization I've really come to appreciate in the last couple of years, which is the WJCS Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse. To understand a little bit about why I'm glad I found an organization like this, I'll explain just a little bit further. About 3 years ago, I had reached a place in life where I was tired of feeling like a pretender. See, outside of all of this were those who looked up to me and who thought I was a fearless leader, who had it all together, who had it all figured out. They did not see the other part of me that I thought existed, the alien, the outsider, the freakazoid who felt like a nobody, a nothing, a zero on the inside, a person who always tried to find a corner and a place to hide, afraid I will say something weird or do something odd and everyone will see the real me with the four-headed alien inside. We will visit this again. For just a few moments, I'm going to take you to a big portion of my life, and I'm going to squeeze it into a short summary of my first 20 years on Earth and the things that contributed to the growth of what I call the alien in me. See, I'm a child of the 80s, born to parents who were babes themselves, and I think just wanted to continue the carefree life of a teenager. In order to do that, they needed a babysitter, for which my mom's younger brother agreed to the job. He began to molest me from about the age of 3 or 4, the first time telling me he will kill my brother if I told my mother. I'm not sure about what exact age it started, but I know that the fact is by the time I was 4 and a half, I was hospitalized with gonorrhea. Authorities investigated, however, I guess they never pieced the puzzle together and they placed me back in the home. I believe this is when my alien began to grow. With the crack epidemic hitting, my family was hit hard and my parents were often absent. My younger brothers and I were neglected, and being the oldest, I was the main caregiver, stealing and doing whatever I needed to provide us with the clothes and food so the neighborhood children can stop laughing at us. I never felt like the rest of the kids. I knew I was different. I felt I was different. I found out the other kids didn't quite know the things that I knew. The rapes by my uncle continued to occur until the age of 10 when it escalated and he began to have a couple of his friends do the same. I suffered in his silence and began to act out, setting fires, drinking harmful substances like household cleaners, cutting myself. I missed a lot of school. I was removed from my home and sent to 2 hospitals and a children's shelter and eventually allowed to go back home. At the age of 12, a neighbor raped me for the first time by climbing into a broken pantry window. We moved and he found me and raped me 2 more times on separate occasions when I was 13, the last time leaving me pregnant. I never told. I learned the art of silence. I was removed from my home again, and after going voluntarily mute, sent to a psychiatric hospital for 8 months and then various placements until the age of 17. After being released, I was an angry teenager. I vowed no one would hurt me again. I joined a gang, I sold drugs, I did drugs, and became very promiscuous. I was in pain and staying high helped me to ease that, or so I thought. I became a Christian at the age of 20. It was my newfound relationship, my downward self-destructing cycle came to an end. I dived headlong into church and ministry, and I left the gangs and drugs and promiscuity just like that. Without the drugs to dull the pain, though, I had the memories of my past that seemed ever present. When memories flooded my minds, my dreams, or even my waking hours, I thought it meant I was not being quite good enough. This brings me back to the Green Monster. Although I now travel the world as a missionary, I felt I was not doing something right. I had a deep hatred and disgust for my own self that no one on this earth knew about. I felt like I belonged to another parent, another planet. My heart raced if the door opened a certain way. I panicked when my back was touched while I was sleeping. My skin crawled when my husband wanted to cuddle. The smell of alcohol brought to the forefront of my mind the most vilest of memories that wouldn't go away. Why? I must have been doing something wrong. I tried to seek help more than once. A chat therapist told me he did not believe me and disconnected the session, throwing me into a depression for weeks. It would be 7 years before I tried again. I gave it another try. This time I said I'll go to an office. By the second session, the therapist attempted to have me drag out the memories from my past to confront them. That session had me moving around but absent from the mind for weeks, and I vowed never to try therapy again. At church, a pastor said I must forget what was behind, and I tried, but I guess I wasn't being good enough. I wrestled with the monster for years. I wanted to help people, but the stupid alien side kept surfacing to remind me of my place. In an attempt to seek help again, I searched for groups for survivors. I no longer trusted to do individual therapy, but I wanted to be in a place where I can hear from other survivors to see if I can find common ground. I located the WJCS Adult Sexual Abuse Survivor Group, run by the Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse through an online search. This was my first introduction to this amazing facet of the organization. The very first group, I was nervous. I sat in a corner on guard, ready to walk out should the group make any unexpected move. I sat and I listened. I looked at the others in the group and listened to their responses, and then I was sucked in. I was in awe as I heard other survivors speak, and I learned that I was not alone. Every adult survivor in the room had the same feelings. We all felt like the only ones on a planet of 7 billion, afraid that others might find out the secret. I was not secretly some alien dropped from another planet and left alone. Well, at least if I was, there was a group of about 5 other adults that were also aliens from the same planet, and 2 other non-alien moderators who assured them that they were indeed okay. Through the psychoeducational component, we learned the whys, that our responses are normal responses to trauma. Now that I learned through this group that I was in fact a normal human being who just had to adjust to abnormal occurrences, and with gentle nudging, I became open to the idea of seeing someone on an individual basis. So I was referred to Stacy. With the memory of the failed couch session fresh on my mind, I must say I entered into therapy more than just a little cautious. I entered individual, guarded, and ready to leave should she attempt to not literally, but in a figuratively Freudian therapy kind of way, attempt to throw me on the couch, dig into my mind, pluck out my disgusting secrets, and have me confront them right there on the spot. In fact, I did almost leave more than once. I let her talk, I scrutinized her, but I listened and started to let out just a little at a time. This was clearly different. She did not judge me. In fact, she often validated my feelings. I felt like she really understood. Life was hard. It was so hard because outside of all this, I'm a leader and help many other people, but I did not have anyone that I can trust with my secrets. They ate me up on the inside, slowly sapping me of life. Do you know what it's like to feel alone? No, I mean really alone. Like an oddity, a freak of nature. Like there's something really wrong with you, but you can't tell anyone. That's how I felt. Over the past couple of years, I have built up this good therapeutic relationship. I found where I can I can really say what I really mean and not be judged. Where I found some good feedback. Where I'm allowed to be honest and not pretend. For the first time, I can say I'm really dealing with my issues. The TCTA, the team, really stands out from above the rest. I don't know much about it, but I know the training they must receive in dealing with people who have experienced trauma and abuse must be second to none. It's special. It speaks to the trauma victims, and you can't really get that everywhere. Believe me, I know. I've gotten a chance to experience not only help from the group therapy and individual therapy, but with the team and your awesome administrator, Liane, also helped pull together some great resources and help me with my Con Ed bill, and through the New York Times Media's funds when my lights almost got shut off. They helped me by utilizing a place called Kids Closet to help me get some clothing for my children. And the staff that I've encountered have been amazing, and I've never felt judged. So I jokingly asked, well, maybe the first time I wasn't joking, if there was not some way to go back and erase the memories of my childhood from my mind. I mean, really, there's hypnosis to cease smoking, to lose weight, or to even make you forget that you're human for a second so you can bark like a dog. Okay, well, I do know that that's not possible. There's no hypnosis, time machine, brain surgery, or even therapy that can remove the trauma from my memory. I cannot change the events of the past, but I'm thankful for this organization who is helping me on my journey forward, that the impact of my past has less trauma over my future. There's no alien lurking inside. I'm not less than due to my traumas. I'm not defined by my past. It does not get the privilege of writing my beginning, my middle, and my ending. I am not broken. I am more than a survivor of abuse, but I am a victor over it.
Thank you, Tanika. It's hard not to be moved by that and by the courage that you have to go through what you went through and to be able to share it with us. And we greatly appreciate you doing that with us today. Alan, Pat, Liane, thank you for taking us through those highlights of TICTA's 35 years, or the beginning of the next 35 years, and for providing us with a deeper understanding of how trauma treatment has evolved and how society has come to better appreciate the impact of trauma on individuals, family, and society, and the strength and resilience of survivors like Tanika. TICTA has made a major difference in the lives of thousands of individuals like Tanika in Westchester, and we'd now like to open up for some questions, and we'll start with a panel and then open it up to the audience. And I'd like to introduce Michael Orth again, the Acting Commissioner of Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health, will moderate the Q&A. Michael's agency has been a long-standing and valued partner of WJCS and a real advocate for improving mental health in our community. So Michael, thank you.
It's a real
pleasure to be here this morning, and Tanika, thank you for sharing your experiences, and it's why we're all here today and why we're striving to do better work, so thank you for sharing. I also want to thank Liane, Pat, and Alan for taking us down memory lane. It reminds me how old I'm getting, but also, really, I just celebrated 24 years at county government yesterday, and I've been able to witness the growth of the TICTA program, but more importantly, the wisdom, courage, and leadership of the board, the previous board, the leadership, and most of all the staff who've been part of this program, and how powerful and the commitment that all of you have. So on behalf of the county, we really appreciate all everyone does here. And as the Deputy County Executive said, we have come a long way, but we all know there's so much more to be done, and I think that's why all of us being here today shows that commitment. Now, we have a term we use in Westchester. We call ourselves Bestchester, and it's because programs like TICTA and the commitment of these programs that make us so great. So I have the privilege of moderating the panel, and I'm going to start a question for anyone can just answer. Is you talked a little bit about the importance of partnerships. Can you talk a little bit about why is the relationships with government and other stakeholders so critical in the work you've done over the years? We'll start with the adult, huh?
Does this work? Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I am really, really proud to work in Westchester doing this type of work because of our amazing partnerships that really allow us to ensure that the people that we work with receive all of the services and all of the treatment in a very well coordinated manner. It's really unusual in Westchester, and I'm very, very proud of that. I know that in other places, the services are far more fragmented, and I think that in order to really truly serve the children and the families, that it needs to be coordinated. And Alan has something to say about that.
Yeah, so part of it is that you can't do the work without it. So for example, it's not just a clinical problem, it's a legal issue. So if the district attorney is going to prosecute a case, they have to talk to us if we're working with the victim to figure out whether this person is ready to testify or not. Working with Child Protective Services is a must, so you have to be able to be in a county that has the resources, the wisdom, and the energy to work as partners, or if cases don't happen. The whole notion that we have a center where people can be interviewed once as opposed to by every different constituency is part and parcel of working together in a way that doesn't re-victimize a victim by a system that's fragmented.
Can I say one more thing actually about that? The other thing too is that this issue is really complicated, you know, and it's often as a society we want to look at this as a very black and white thing, and it's so not a black and white thing. And so in order to appreciate the complexities, it's really helpful to have relationships with the other institutions and the other agencies and the staff, so that you can really work through the complexities of these things. Because as a society, we want to say, oh, you know, the perpetrator is horrible and awful and evil. But the truth of the matter is, if you're a child and the perpetrator is your father, you're going to have complicated feelings. And so it's essential in order to be able to have that greater sophistication of approaches towards families and children.
So if we may not get past one question, but I've been a mistake with this group. I would just add one thing, and that is, it's important for us as the system to get our act together so that people are not interviewed 16 times, 20 times, and so they have an advocate or the therapist who's working with them, and we need to coordinate and do the behind-the-scenes work with the district attorney's office, the police department, the medical centers, out of respect for the people who we're working with, and I think Westchester is extraordinary and doing a really good job with that, starting with the children's system of care.
Thank you. And it sounds like we use the word courage and vision and being strategic, and it happens at different levels, at the direct practice level, but also at the systemic level. It does take courage and leadership to make things happen. And I just want to echo, you know, our Deputy County Executive and County Executive support, also Senator Andrew Stewart Cousins, your support, and we also, just to pull the plug, Kristen Peters from Shelley Meyer's office. Are you here? Just show of hand. Thank you for being here as well. So it truly takes all of us at the macro systemic level and at the practice level to really move forward and make this happen. So thank you. I'm going to move on to the second question, and this is more of a direct practice question. And I think we, in our hearts, know the answer, but do people really recover from the trauma of child sexual abuse? Can you talk a little bit about that from a clinical perspective and a recovery perspective?
I think this will again be a multiple part answer from us, but so I feel like I have had the privilege of witnessing people heal from the trauma of sexual abuse. I could not say it any better than Tanika. You know, there's this wish, this desire to make it all go away. It becomes a part of who the person is, and I think the best work is respecting that person, respecting their history, and helping them to live the life that they want to live right now. So I think we've learned over the years how to help people heal and move on with life.
I was having a conversation with a patient of mine last night who's a 32-year-old woman with a serious abuse history, and she asked me the same question. She said, is it really possible that I'm going to be able to recover from this? And I said, yeah. I said, you know, it's sort of like what the process will look like is that these things that have happened to you will settle, and they'll settle in a place where it's okay and where you can take stock of where you've been and where you are moving forward. So obviously, as Tanika eloquently said, you can't do brain surgery and you can't do hypnosis and you can't take it out of the person's experience, but we can help them allow things to settle so that they can look forward to the future.
And one last comment. There are so many human experiences that people endure. Sex abuse is one. Living in Afghanistan is another. Living in Puerto Rico right now is another. People are resilient, people recover. Some people need lots of help for a long time. Other people are able to manage with limited outside intervention. It's trite to say this, but it's true. We learn how to help people access their strengths in them. If anybody was listening to Tanika and didn't learn something from her, they weren't listening. And I think that at the end of the day, this is really, it's a little bit like the Wizard of Oz. Our job is mostly to help access what's already in people and help it rise to the front or to the top, and kind of get over the hurdles that lousy experiences in life have gotten in the way of.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And something that Pat had brought up, the system of care, and I remember in the early days, WJCS was being a leader, and looking at Connie Consuela, when we used to go to network meetings and do training and talk about strength-based and resiliency, and at the time it was quite unusual and progressive, and how far it's come, and thanks to the leadership of TICTA and the program. Really appreciate that. Now I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to throw it out to the group. Have incidents decreased over the lifespan of the program?
So I want to answer that first because it's a little controversial. We were talking about this in the office a few weeks ago, and then we saw some statistics from David Finkelow, who's been doing this stuff for years from University of New Hampshire. And he actually showed that incidents of child sexual abuse have decreased. So the notion of prevention of child sexual abuse is complicated. Is it really true that people who are inclined to sexually abuse are doing it less? Maybe. What I think is more likely is that we are much better at making it okay to come forward earlier, so that the same people that might have in the past been abused for a longer period of time are finding the voice in them to come forward earlier, so that the total number of incidents may have gone down. And to the extent that we as a society can make the kinds of changes that we would like, and that TICTA can play a role in that, all the better. But I think it's more likely that, I don't know that the number of victims have decreased, but it doesn't surprise me that the number of incidents has decreased.
So I would just add to that two things. One, this will always be an underreported crime given the nature of what happens and the strength that it takes to get to a point of disclosing it. So statistics are one thing, but I think we need to realize it will always be underreported, so hard to get a good handle on it. The other thing that I think we're curious about is the impact of the internet and the availability of child pornography and the various ways that people are able to commit crimes using the internet, I think has unfortunately given new access to people who are prone to sexually abused children. So I think with time, I think it's changed. I think the nature of some of the offenses have changed. I think the grooming process has changed. I don't really believe that less is happening.
Thank you. Let's throw it out to the audience. If there are any questions, just stand up, raise your hand, and just speak loudly. Yes?
Hi, I'm Rabbi Pam Wax. I'm a spiritual care coordinator at WJCS. And when we were based, our department was based in Hartsdale. I got a lot of referrals from Rhonda, from Roberta when she was there, from Silvana. And I have been less in touch with what TICTA is doing. So I'm curious about the spiritual component of the work that you do with your clients.
Good question. Thank you.
Wow, that's a huge question. Thank you, Pam. I think that on our team we have an appreciation and I believe a sophisticated enough acknowledgement of the fact that culture and religion are essential for people's identity. And this is something that we have actually spoken about. One of the things I'm very proud of is that we always have a didactic or a teaching component in our team meetings. And this has been an essential one because there is no end stage to understanding the impact of culture and religion on people's identity. And also how they make meaning of abuse that has happened given their spiritual and cultural beliefs.
Other questions? Comments? Yes.
So this is more of a comment, but as the director of the Children's Advocacy Center for Mid-County, I'm in a position where I have the opportunity to talk with other CACs from all over the country. And I think it's very easy to sometimes take for granted things that are in your own backyard, but I can say that we are so lucky in Westchester to have the relationship and to have the availability of WJCS. And it's very unusual for children's advocacy centers who struggle to find resources to serve the children and families that they work with. So it takes a lot of work, the collaboration and the ongoing communication, but we're very grateful for it, and the children and families that we serve are very lucky to have you. So
Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. We have one more question in the back. If you can just stand up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vanessa. I'm from Domestic Abuse Services at the WJCS in Greenwich. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the other types of trauma that you see other than childhood sexual trauma.
So other types of trauma.
Yeah, our biggest program is for children who are sexually abused, and of course we also treat adults with child sex abuse histories and children and adults affected by family violence. I would also say that we have treated people with moderate to severe traumas that don't fall in those areas. So for example, witnessing accidental death, serious trauma such as that. And of course we also have the program for children, youth with problematic sexual behavior. But I would say that we have always, even though our programs are often guided by grant funding and priorities such as that are indicated by grant funding, that we will treat anybody with moderate to severe trauma as well, assuming that we have the capacity.
Okay, I think we're going to turn it over to Bernie Kimberg. I just want to, something I learned from Liane and being in some of her committees, while it's a celebration today, 35 years, it's also a challenging discussion. And I think as we all leave the room, just to be mindful of some of the issues we talked about and most importantly, taking care of ourselves. So thank you all for allowing me to be here, and I'll turn it over to Bernie.
Special thank you to Commissioner Hall, a good friend and colleague all around the country. I have the privilege of being the Chief Operating Officer of WJCS, but before I do anything else, thank you. Your story is an inspiration to all of us. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Nelson was kind enough to ask each of you to stand up and be recognized individually. One of the most special things about TICTA is that you're a team. So I'm going to ask you to stand up once more as a team and to be recognized. fortunate to have our panel. Let's acknowledge Alan Trager, Pat Lemp, Liane Nelson for their 35 years of service and continued service, providing trauma treatment to our citizens of Westchester County. Thank you. There's something that doesn't quite feel right about using the word celebration when we talk about treating trauma, but 35 years, we are here to acknowledge how fortunate the county is that we have our treatment center for trauma and abuse. And I'm joined today by members of our board of directors, Neil Sandler, Barry Kaplan, Marikita Blumberg, Shirley Schweel, and Larry Dobosh, one of our most central core programs. I wish it was a program that we could say we see an opportunity to sunset at some point. Unfortunately, that's not the case. TICTA, Treatment Center for Trauma and Abuse. This is the last time that officially TICTA is going to be referred to as TICTA. I have the distinct privilege of announcing to you today publicly that a group of donors who have chosen to remain anonymous have made a $1 million plus contribution, and instead of naming it for themselves, they made the decision, the heartfelt decision, to name TICTA after its founder and its leader for 20 years. Here on after, TICTA will be referred to as the Trager Lemp Center, treating trauma and promoting resilience. I can't think of a better honor for the two of you, so congratulations. I live in Ardsley, and when I go past the middle school, there's a sign that I often refer to. And when I speak, it says, "The only thing better than our past is our future." We are very fortunate that Dr. Nelson is part of our present and part of our future as we move TICTA into the years to be. So thank you, Liane, for your service and your continued service in this capacity. A morning such as this, a tribute such as this, $1 million contribution from donors who, again, have known long time and been supporters of WJCS's mental health services, is truly a reason to celebrate. None of this would be possible without our staff, Susan Lewin, Jan Fisher, and their team, so I want to thank you for And this could be the first time a plaque given by a deputy county executive is out of date. 10 minutes when it was given, so it's pretty remarkable. Thank you, government officials. Thank you, elected officials. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. Please enjoy. Thank you for coming.